Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on your Saturday afternoons. My name is Jessica Dibble, and I'm a senior at Brown studying sociology, and I'm one of the directors of the Ivy Film Festival this year.
Hi, my name is Grace Atanasio, and I'm also a director of the festival and a junior here at Brown studying English. On behalf of the entire film festival, we are both so honored to be joined here today to discuss the groundbreaking organization Time's Up.
Tina Chen serves as president and CEO of Time's Up Now and the Time's Up Foundation, overseeing the organization's strategic plans to change culture, companies, and laws in order to make work safe, fair, and dignified for women of all kinds. In 2017, Tina co-founded the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, which has connected thousands of people to legal or public relations support for sexual harassment across dozens of different industries. Prior to taking the helm at Time's Up, Tina was a former assistant to President Obama, executive director of the White House Council on Women and Girls, and chief of staff to First Lady Michelle Obama. At the White House, Tina spearheaded the first ever White House Summit on Working Families and helped form the White House Task Force to protect students from sexual assault. She has served on numerous strategic advisory boards for organizations, including the United States of Women, which she continues to co-chair.
Also joining us today, Amber Tamblyn, who is an Emmy, Golden Globe, and Independent Spirit Award nominated actress, writer, and director, and the author of 6 books, including the critically acclaimed Era of Ignition, Coming of Age in a Time of Rage and Revolution. Amber's been acting since she was 16, and her accomplishments include roles in the Sisterhood of Traveling Pants, Joan of Arcadia, House MD, and is currently filming FX's new show, Why the Last Man. She's a contributing writer for the New York Times, poet in residence at Amy Poehler's Smart Girls, poetry reviewer for Buzz Magazine, and a founding member of the Time's Up organization. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Tina Chen and Amber Tamblyn. Hello, thank you both so much.
Hello. Hello, virtually.
Thank you both for. Sorry, Grace, you go.
I just want to thank you both for being here and joining us. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's truly a pleasure to have you both.
Well, we are delighted to be here and so glad to see so many folks tuning in from the Brown community on a Saturday afternoon.
Ditto.
So to start off, not only did Grace and I want to know the answer to this question, but we actually received an audience member question for the same question as well. And we want to start this conversation by asking you both to describe how and why you became involved with Me Too movement and Time's Up organization at large and what really drew you to it.
You want to start, Amber?
Yeah. I mean, I think what is so powerful about Time's Up, and I will say so many people have always asked me what the difference is between Time's Up and Me Too. And one of the things that we have always said is that Time's Up was created so that no woman or man would ever have to say Me Too again. So our response was really sort of a call to action in terms of what we could do collectively across industries to change some of the really systemic issues and pervasive issues that had to do with everything from sexual harassment to sexual assaults to intimidation across industries, and find a way to make things better for everyone in the workplace. I can speak for myself in the entertainment business that women had been experiencing for a very, very long time all kinds of different issues that pertained to all of these topics that Time's Up has worked so hard to stop and to change. But ultimately, I think what's most powerful about it, and what continues to be most powerful about it, is that Time's Up was born not as something that we thought about, that we wanted to do. It was a collective response to many, many women, men, non-binary people putting their foot down and saying, we're not going to take this anymore, and things are going to change, and we're not going to ask for your permission on how to do that. And you saw women, again, coming together from across industries and brainstorming in rooms that had a lack of a patriarchal perspective for the most part. Things, of course, were tricky because you're also getting different types of women in a room together who have never been able to voice these opinions to each other and amongst each other in the absence of the opinion of men. So it was a very powerful experience. And what was born from that was Time's Up. And I think that the language in the title of its name tells you everything you need to know, which was that we were going to push forward. We were going to push change across the board, from legal, legislative policy, in every way that we could to try to make working environments safer for everybody.
Yeah, no, Amber was really one of those incredible women from Hollywood who were there at the beginning when the Harvey Weinstein reporting broke, in October 2017. And all of a sudden, everyone who thought they were alone, because that's actually the Predator's playbook, was to keep everybody silent and separate, and nobody knew, and none of us knew. And I've been doing working families issues my whole career. None of us knew how pervasive sexual harassment was, even though it's been over 3 decades since it's been outlawed, until that reporting broke. But I always have to give, the women of Hollywood credit, because they came together out of their pain. They wanted to turn it into action. And they didn't stop with themselves in their own industry. They realized they were women of some privilege, and they had platforms, but they wanted to figure out how could they use those to help women in other industries, especially low-wage women, farm worker women. And there was this amazing moment, which you'll remember, Amber, when the Allianz de Campesinos, the farm worker women organization, led by Monica Ramirez, published a open letter in the New York Times to the women of Hollywood that didn't say what you think it might say, right? Which was, you're women of privilege, and here we are in the fields. They said, we see you. We know what you're going through. We stand in sisterhood with you, whether it's in the fields or whether it's on studios. This is the same kind of gender discrimination and sexual harassment and white patriarchy that is oppressing everyone. And there was this wonderful moment where, that hand was extended and the women of Hollywood reached out and took it. And that led to the Times Up Legal Defense Fund. And to your question, Jessica, I've been a single working mom, and because full disclosure, Jessica and I have known each other for a long time. I'm a single working mom. My whole career as a practicing lawyer before the White House, and then in the White House. And when we got to the White House, for me and for, Valerie Jarrett, who I worked with to do the White House Council of Women and Girls, we were both single working moms our whole careers. The Obamas, when they entered the White House, you'll remember, were the parents of two working parents of 2 young children. So they knew the pressures that working women and families have and the lack of structures that we have in this country to support them. So that's why Working Families Agenda was something that we really highlighted during the Obama years. And I continued doing that and was still doing it in private practice when the Harvey Weinstein moment happened in October 2017. And there's, my life is a little bit of being in the right place at the right time. I happened to be in Los Angeles, about 2 weeks after the Weinstein first article broke, and got pulled into a meeting and then never left, Amber, right? You got pulled into a meeting.
That's how it was for all of us. It was like getting pulled into a bunch of meetings where it's like, we're angry. What are we going to do?
Right.
And that's how it started.
Then never leaving. And, really came up with the idea of that first initiative of ours, which was the Times Up Legal Defense Fund, because, there was a moment where the whole thing could have stopped dead in its tracks, because the usual, what I call the Predator's playbook, which is how this has been silenced for so long. And one page out of the Predator's playbook is, if someone accuses you, someone uses that hashtag #MeToo, for example, you sue them for defamation. And that usually scares them because they don't have the resources to defend against the most powerful lawyers in Los Angeles, and they'll go away. And that's when we realized, this could all stop if we don't figure out how to get these women legal resources and help on an ongoing basis. And that's why we created the Legal Defense Fund, which I give a lot of credit to the National Women's Law Center, because I called up their brand new president and CEO about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving and said, here's a new idea. How would you like to house this and take this on? We don't have any money in the bank yet, but we're going to create this. It's never been done before, but we can do it. And we want to announce it on January 1st. So we scrambled to do that. And then there's a moment that one of our colleagues often tells, where they said, well, how much do we need to raise? And I said, if we want to be serious, if we want to send a signal to the predators that this is going to be backed with resources, we need at least $10 million. We were at zero, by the way. So we need $10 million because you need to demonstrate this was going to have teeth. And we launched, in the New York Times on January 1st, and on the Golden Globes red carpet. You'll all remember everybody in black and, getting pins delivered to everybody, with the new name Time's Up. Oprah's amazing speech, and, raised $24 million in a matter of weeks, which was one of the biggest GoFundMe campaigns up to that point. So, and it's still going, we've helped over 4,000 folks. And the statistic I'm most proud of is that 3/4 of those folks identify as low income. So the objective we had, which was to make sure we were providing a resource for low wage women in particular, is something I'm really proud that we've been able to put together.
I mean, I so remember being a freshman in college when all of this was coming out, and on Twitter and seeing people that you admire so much in film and television kind of posting their stories. And I always felt so emotional to be so attached to film and TV, but then also realize this side that's very true, and that needs to be recognized and honored and also fought against. And that New York Times issue with all that front page, it just I still remember it so clearly. And
I have Grace, let me just tell you that I have that New York Times letter. I framed it. It's right outside of my kitchen. When I walk through, I can see it every day because I felt the same way. And there was something about that letter, and not just the names who signed on to it, but the women who had been silenced, whose names were not there, women who are not famous, women who across the entire country, we all felt so deeply connected to women we had never spoken to before. And these conversations we were having together had never ever taken place before. Never like that, in a room where you are actually telling the truths, the very scary truths. And you're also learning things about people that you thought, oh my God, I didn't know that about that person, that this is what they had been doing. And it was as exactly as Tina said, it was the predators playbook. Their worst nightmare was that we were all going to be getting together and doing this. And I think it just really opened up a dam for this huge movement and for so much change.
Yeah. I mean, kind of going to our first question or second question with Tarana Burke's Me Too movement, kind of the eruption in Hollywood and how this catalyzed conversations that stretch way out of Hollywood. I mean, I was at college then, so it even came into our classroom conversations, how the university handles these conversations, how things in high school are happening. Do you think that this sharing of stories was a slow burn, or once you realized, or people realized, oh, they are not alone, these people feel the same way, they've gone through similar experiences, that community or safety really helped people share their stories?
Oh, I think so. Here's the thing. I sometimes, I'll answer this, Grace, it was slightly differently, which is, people sometimes ask me, why then, right? Why was 2017? Right. Because it's not like we haven't had sexual harassment moments before, right? Including, for example, when Anita Hill testified, a couple of decades earlier, and, it was all over the news. We were all watching the hearings. And two things I think were really different about this moment. One was, it was the social media, right? Because you had a hashtag Me Too. So 20 years ago, 25, I guess, when Anita Hill testified, if this had happened to you, what would you have done? You would have told 10 of your friends, and it would have gone no place else, right? I know you guys can't remember a time before the internet, but there was a time before the internet. There was no email even back then. So you'd have to pick up the phone and actually tell somebody the story over the phone. And it didn't have a place to get out into the world. So the fact that you have the internet, you had Tarana, who had brilliantly, coined the term almost a decade previously, right? To talk about what she was experiencing as a Black woman survivor, really latched onto it. And thousands, there was, Amber's right, it was like the dam broke, and thousands and thousands of people started posting, telling stories they'd never told before, telling their family stories they'd never told before. But it didn't just stop there. It could go on to the hashtag and just get amplified, which then, you're right, empowered more people. Because once you saw yourself telling a story that was shared by others, And then the second thing I think was different was I do think the fact it started in Hollywood made a difference because, you know, as brilliant and eloquent as Anita Hill was when she testified, we didn't really know her. You know, we didn't know her backstory. We didn't feel like we knew her. You know, she was a one-dimensional figure in that hearing. And but by the way, the other side painted her that way too. But here, when you saw, you know, somebody like Amber, like Ashley Judd, you know, Kerry Washington, people like that, as you said, Grace, people that you knew and related to as a fan or you admired their work, talking about this, it made a difference, right? I think it resonated. You know, we all think, I joke with everybody in Time's Up saying, like, because I come to this as a fan, right? We all think we're your girlfriends, right? Because we're following we're watching your IG, we're doing all that. We really think we're your girlfriends. You have no idea who we are, but we think we're your girlfriends. And so that really landed differently, I think, for everybody, and has propelled and just put the whole movement in a very different space, I think, than it would have been otherwise.
And I think, you know, jumping on what Tina said, what was so wonderful, I think, for us as actors and actresses in our business is we also were feeling very frustrated and tired of just wearing dresses, of like not having our opinions beyond this creative arena being taken seriously, and our personal stories also being subjugated in the way that any other woman's would be, whether that woman is an employee of McDonald's, whether that woman is a farm worker, no matter who that is. Sadly, we all shared the commonality of those abuses, right? And so for us, I think it was so powerful to suddenly be introduced to Tina and Robbie Kaplan, who's one of the co-founders of the Times Up Legal Defense Fund, and Fatima Goss Graves and Monica Ramirez, and all of these incredible women and organizers, and Tirana, who I got to meet through America Ferrera. Once again, like, America texted me, was like, Tirana's in New York, she's gonna come over, let's all talk. I was like, great, I'll text Michelle Williams, let's get in a room. I don't know what the hell we're gonna do, but like, let's all talk. That was profound. And to feel like we had the permission to do that, to go in a room and say, like, sorry, I'm just gonna cuss, we're gonna fuck shit up. Like, we're gonna actually come up with ideas and demand conversation about it and not take no for an answer. That was incredible. And to know that there was something that we could do with those social media platforms, as Tina said, you know, one of my great privileges and joys of my entire life beyond my acting career was helping Robbie Kaplan pass the New York Safety Agenda, which helped extend the statute of limitations for when you can report abuse in New York State. Before that had happened, you know, New York was quite out of step and archaic in many of its laws. And because we were able to come together, because we were able to have women like Leslie Silva and Michelle Hurd and, you know, and Mina Stuvari, and they went and they lobbied in Albany and New York with Robbie, but that put a face to the pain. And putting the face to the pain was, I think, the first open door that really allowed people to feel like, that's me standing on that stage. That's me saying, this is enough. Enough is enough. My story matters, whether I tell it in a week or whether I tell it 10 years from now. My story matters. Justice matters. So to my end, that has been one of the most significant and profound things that I also think, beyond Time's Up, beyond, you know, my experience with Tina and with all of these women can continue to do this everywhere. I've said this many times, but like, the four of us right now, if we wanted, we could create an alternative Time's Up. We could put our heads together. Each of you has something that you have to offer. Jessica, you have something. Grace, you have something. Like, we could say, what is that? What is the thing we want to effectively change between the four of us? And that each of us can identify we have a strong suit in.
Yeah, and we're kind of going off like the face the pain, that collective response really was the catalyst for creating it. And the timing, Tina mentioning just 2017, social media was really that space to spew it all. And something you've both spoken about is about when creating Time's Up, it was like necessary to attach the conversation to something concrete, which is the Legal Defense Fund and how that came about. And even in IFF, Grace and I, we were talking about, we started to internally evaluate ourselves in order to make sure we're making tangible changes to ensure that it's a safe space continuously. And we kind of wanted to know a bit more, how did you all transition from this exposing the conversation stage to the Legal Defense Fund, kind of like Tina speaking to how did you decide that we really need to have $10 million to raise to really make concrete change, and knowing like when it's just talking in a room to how are we going to make it last and be sustained.
Well, so, it really, sometimes things just happen, right? I mean, literally at one, it may have been actually the first time I was in Los Angeles, I got pulled into one of those rooms. Then I was in the office of, it was Michelle Kidley, Amber, so one of our founders, who's at CAA, Creative Artists Agency. And while we were sitting there, because I'm a lawyer, she showed me something that she had just received from a woman who had previously worked in Hollywood, but no longer was. She actually, because of the assault she suffered, left the business. She had been, not in front of the camera person, but a back of the camera person. And now had a dive shop with her family in Hawaii. But she had been inspired by Me Too and posted on Facebook about being sexually assaulted by Brett Ratner, a very famous director.
Yeah.
And she had then just gotten one of those Predator Playbook lawsuit letters. Marty Singer, one of the most, aggressive, famous lawyers in Hollywood, wrote her a letter saying, if you don't take this down, we're suing you for defamation. We're going to ruin you and your family. Literally, I think he said that in the letter. Yeah. And that was when we figured we have to get her help. Now, Robbie Kaplan, who Amber mentioned, stepped in to take, before we even had any money to pay for it, stepped in to take Melanie Kohler's case, because that was the case where I said this could have all gotten shut down. Because if Marty Singer had been successful, and if all of a sudden women who were using the hashtag Me Too thought they would be liable and their livelihoods completely disrupted by these lawsuits, it would have ended. And that actually is what's happened over time. That's why for decades, that's the way it was handled. So first we got Robbie, and then I said, we just have to have one. We have to have a legal defense fund to do this. And then I learned, which I did not know, I will say when we first started, it was mostly on the defense side. But as we were putting it together, because I'm not an employment lawyer by practice, talking to employment lawyers, I realized you also needed on the affirmative side, right, to sue for damages if you had sexual harassment happen to you. Now, I didn't think it was a problem because typically in an employment law case like that, you get your attorney's fees. That's one of the protections under federal employment law. But I then learned that if you're a low-wage woman and your wages are really low, so the most you could ever recover if you won your case is a really small amount, you can't find a lawyer to take your case because they can't afford to take it because your recovery will never be enough to cover both giving you some money and giving your lawyer some money. And so that was another reason why we needed both on the plaintiff side and on the defense side to have enough money, to have volunteer lawyers who are willing to do it. Mostly, to be clear, the money's there to help out in cases, to set up a system so we can have it and support the system, and then set up a system to recruit lawyers to do it for free on a pro bono basis, and then to have a pot of money for those cases that are really hard, or the lawyer doesn't have enough money to float the money ahead of time, or it's a really complicated case, to have some money there to help pay for it. But a lot of the cases get handled by lawyers who are doing this for pro bono fee, or they're fronting the money themselves. And we have a terrific network of over 800 lawyers who have volunteered to do this work, right? To be, at the ready if somebody calls and the Legal Defense Fund connects them with that. But then, I will say that it took a while because it was a good chunk of 2018 that we then had to think about, well, then what next, right? And there was a moment where we kind of maybe only would have just done the Legal Defense Fund, right? And it wasn't clear to us, whether you needed a separate advocacy organization or not. And we spent a lot of time making sure that we were really filling a need, not doing something that somebody was already doing. And it turns out there aren't that many national organizations working in the sexual harassment space on the advocacy front. There are lots of local ones. There's lots of folks on the legal side. But, the thing about sexual harassment is, we needed an organization that was both going to continue to work for survivor justice and things like changing the New York laws that Amber talked about, but also start to do the work that we needed to do to make sure we can create workplaces where it doesn't happen in the first place, right? I mean, sexual harassment is a symptom of a fundamentally broken workplace, right? One
Yeah,
that's
yes.
toxic, one that doesn't have, women and people of color and disabled and LGBTQIA workers fully represented. Because if you have full representation, then you're having respectful and safe and equitable workplaces, and you don't have sexual harassment happening. So, that's the world we want to work for. We don't want to just keep picking up the pieces after it happens. So that's how we then created the part of Time's Up that I'm now the head of, and doing that advocacy work, doing research to help support the work, doing work with companies, because actually the fastest way to change is to get a company to change their own practices than it is to try to get a bill through Congress, as we've seen. But we're doing both of those things. So that's what we're doing right now.
Right. And you both have kind of mentioned this, but like these systems that are in place are just like so toxic and just perpetuate the same kind of reality for generations, both for women, but all people who have different identities. And Amber, you were talking about this earlier, like the power of just having these women in the room for the first time with no one else to share their stories and kind of build this community, and also just get like their true rage out was really important. And you talk about this too in your book. But I was wondering, have either of you seen improvement in the visibility of different identities and positions of power, or in meetings at studios, agencies, production companies, and so on? And do you think there's been any improvement, or if this has helped kind of people feel comfortable in the workplace, or there'd be like less instances of harassment?
I mean, I would say absolutely. I think sometimes it's hard to see that when the change feels incremental. But when you look at, somebody like Janet Mock getting an overall deal at Netflix, when Black trans woman, like when you look at America Ferrera, writing and running her own show, directing her own show around Latino voices. When you look at what Ava DuVernay has been able to do in storytelling for people of color, it's profound. And that all happened. I mean, 2017 was a day ago. That was actually in the pantheon. This is not that far along. And considering what it took before that, like I've been acting since I was 9 years old. And I will tell you that in my entire career, in the 25 plus years that I've been acting, up until this TV show I'm shooting for FX right now, which is directed by all women, all 10 episodes, I had only ever worked with 3 women directors, one of which was a Black woman. 25 years. Things have changed. They've changed in a huge, profound way, even though sometimes it's hard to see that because some of the old issues, as Tina mentioned, the underlying issues, the patriarchal pin that still sits there has not gone away. And that is what we keep trying to sort of chip away at. And because it's not enough to just say we're working, it's also about the treatment of how women are being, treated in the workplace, how their creative perspectives are being perceived, whether or not there is enough representation in film and television. It wasn't even up until a few years ago that, for instance, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, which votes for the Academy Awards, they finally did the right thing and expanded their membership and added on a very large number of women and people of color. And they need to do a lot more, but they've done a really phenomenal job. I myself was finally invited to be an Academy member after doing 80 plus films. So it took them a while, but it takes all of these organizations a while. And that's why I feel so deeply that we have to keep our eye on the prize, and we have to be patient and persistent. We have to keep doing those two things together. You can't have one without the other. And you can't feel like it's not happening fast enough, because, truly it takes time. It just takes time. And I think when you look right now at where we're actually at, when you look at the programming that's on TV and in film, when you see the changes happening, you have to remember that was extraordinary, that took place in just 3 or 4 years. Pretty extraordinary considering how archaic things were before that. So I feel good. There's a lot left to be done. There's a lot of work our unions need to be doing, that they are doing. They're working hard, but they could work harder. And that's on all of us to hold them all accountable and to keep the continued conversation happening, so that it's not just like we had these meetings years ago, we were angry then, maybe we're not as angry now, but those conversations still continue. And we know that the work continues on until we have much more representation for everybody in front of the camera and behind it.
Yeah, no, Amber's absolutely right. One thing I will add on perspective, because Amber's right, it was like a day ago in 2017, is look, that we are trying to change deeply rooted societal norms. I mean, these are things that go back not just to 2017 or 2010, this goes back generations and millennia. And I often say gender discrimination is the one thing, if you think about it, that has transcended time. It transcends race, it transcends religion, geography. It is literally biblical in proportion because it's written in the Bible. I mean, it is that is the scope. It's the one thing that point to any society, point to any point in time, with a little exception of those blips of those matriarchal societies that are now long gone, in the Mayan jungles or elsewhere, this is a patriarchal societies across the board around the globe. And that's what we're fighting against. So the idea that, it's only been 3 years since 2017, this will take a while. And there's going to be backlash, and there's some bit of a one step forward or 2 steps forward, 1 step back that will start to happen. But Amber's absolutely right. Patience and persistence is what's really key and pretty important. And we're relying on you guys, your generation to
it's
pick
really,
up
really
the mantle
true.
and keep running with it.
Yep, they're very, very true.
Yeah, I definitely understand kind of it's change, but it's also going to be incremental, and it's a deeply rooted problem that doesn't just go away overnight. And as we've all kind of experienced for the last year, the pandemic has caused a lot of changes, but also a lot of confronting that I think as a country we have faced, particularly with racial reckoning, leading to many more conversations and awareness around diversity and inclusion. And I'm wondering, how have you guys both seen or heard women's rights and equity being incorporated into these conversations around race in the workplace?
Well, the other thing I've been very proud of Time's Up is from the beginning, I think the issues of the intersectional experience of women of color, of trans women, of LGBTQIA women, of disabled women have been, something we've always thought about, from even the very early meetings where there were, we created a women of color, part of Time's Up to have those conversations in the entertainment group. We've continued to do that and make it very much a centerpiece of the work at Time's Up to this day. And really, centering a lot of what we're doing around changing workplaces to making sure we're highlighting what women of color need. The current work we're doing, for example, right now that's really critical is in light of the pandemic. One of the things we've seen is over 2.5 million women leave the workforce completely. Not only is women's unemployment high, and women of color's unemployment is particularly high, especially Latinx women, even as the unemployment rate goes down. It is also the case that women are absolutely just leaving the labor force altogether because they can no longer deal with these twin demands of working and what you need to do at home, whether it's children, it's an elderly parent, it's a loved one, it's yourself. We don't have caregiving structures in this country, to support, and really provide the infrastructure that we need. And so, we have, really been pushing along with a coalition of other organizations to make caregiving a key part of infrastructure, making sure that businesses understand they have a stake in making sure that their workers have access to affordable care. To make sure as an economy moving forward, we need to make sure we're investing in those jobs and making sure they're good paying jobs, that there's labor protections for caregivers, that we're recognizing career paths. It's a growth industry that we're going to need. We've got I think the number is 2 million babies born a year and 2 million of us, myself included, turning 65, every year. So it's a growth industry that we're going to need. And we're behind the rest of the world, right? We are one of only 2 countries in the world that does not have a national paid leave policy of some form. We've got nothing.
Yep.
The pandemic with no paid leave, no even national sick leave policy. It's crazy. So this is why, it's been a priority for us. I'm so excited because just Wednesday, President Biden in his new infrastructure bill, we've been pushing them that this is care infrastructure is as critical to stimulating the economy as roads and bridges infrastructure is, because the workers, even to go work on those roads and bridges, can't get there if they don't have caregiving. And he recognized that. They are, there's a $400, billion investment in home and community-based services. There's labor protections for caregivers in it. There's building daycare centers in daycare desert neighborhoods. It's an incredible investment that we're very excited on. And now the task at hand is to make sure that it gets through Congress, right? That people recognize it. It's wildly bipartisan. We've done the research from our impact lab to know it, that 8 out of 10 Republicans support this. So we've got to make sure those Republican voters let their Republican legislators know that they want this and it's important. But it is, if we really want to build back an economy that is better than it was before, that is fairer, that is more equitable, these jobs are overwhelmingly held by women of color. The people who are getting forced out of the labor market are overwhelmingly women of color. So if we're going to bring them back and we're going to build an equitable economy, we're going to have to address this issue.
Yeah, to Tina's point, I'll just leave you with this nugget of information, which I think most people think that cannot possibly be true. But for instance, just alone in December, 100% of I think it was like 150,000 jobs or 100 something, it was a lot. It was close to that number. Were accounted for women who had jobs lost in December. It was 100% of lost jobs were women. So let that tell you everything you need to know about who this pandemic has affected, how it's affected them, and I feel like so much of the stride that we've made and the work that we have pushed for in the last 4 years. Really, women got the brunt end of it, the worst end of the stick, as it were, in the last couple of years, and especially in this last year with the pandemic. So we have to work overtime to make up for that loss. We have to work overtime to make sure women are coming back into the workforce, most especially women of color and low-income job women who are at the most risk of losing those jobs and staying unemployed for long periods of time. And I think it's going to take all of us to keep, as Tina was saying, like, you have to keep pushing. We kept pushing the Biden administration. They got it. He heard it. They understood that this was absolutely imperative and important. And we just have to keep that language out there so that people remember, a large portion of the victims of this pandemic have been women, and predominantly women of color and mothers.
Yeah, it's crazy. Parents weren't supported with daycares and having support for their children before the pandemic. And now, Jess and I are both students. Last March, we were just sent home, which, no one could have prepared for that. But then it goes from, I need to find a caregiver for my child for X amount of time. Now it's truly 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And how do you think, women have been penalized for being working moms forever. I know you both are working mothers. How do you think this plays into finding or giving care to children for working mothers or working single parents?
Well, absolutely. We have not had those supports. One of the things I learned, when we started this 12 years ago, when I got in the Great Recession, and we got to the White House, I very much was already pushing this agenda. But here's one thing I learned at the time, during the last Great Recession 12 years ago, everyone was just focused on getting a job. Even workers themselves, I saw the polling, they did not support necessarily caregiving investments. They just wanted their employer to get them a job. And the prevailing view in this country, until very recently, has been, caregiving is just something a worker's got to figure out by themselves.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's not only is it a legacy of just gender discrimination, it's a legacy of slavery. Think about it. There's just been free labor for domestic work for decades and years. It's why caregivers have not had access to labor protections, because they didn't include them in the labor protections, in the New Deal, because of that legacy. And that has been the view. That's why we're behind France. We're behind Scandinavia. We are behind all of the, Western developed countries in having, public support for caregiving, because our prevailing American attitude has been, it's not your employer's job, it's not your government's job. Well, that, I'm happy to say, has now changed through a lot of advocacy and a lot of work and a lot of talking about why this is important and doing the work and doing it, that now we see the polling that we did, which shows that even during a pandemic, I was worried, I'll be honest, when the pandemic hit, that you'd go back to the, I just need a job. But actually, we did 2 rounds of surveys, both about equal pay in the summer and caregiving in the winter, to make sure in this moment, do voters still think those are important things to pay attention to? And overwhelmingly, voters in both parties absolutely thought that equal pay was still critically important in the middle of the pandemic, and caregiving was critical. So we've made that shift, right? We've happily made the shift. I will say, I'm happy to say, I think I see employers making the shift, because the interesting thing that's happening is employers are finding that even as they're ready to open up their manufacturing floors, they can't field a full day of work because their workers are at home because of caregiving. To your point, Grace, they've got kids at home from school. They can't actually come in. And so now you see employers trying to figure out, well, what can I do with my empty space? Can I convert that to some sort of childcare, or what can I do? And we've been holding roundtables with companies to try to help them and get better best practices together. And so, and try to enlist employers, private sector employers, to actually start doing the right thing for their workers. And they're finding that actually it's good for business. It's not a cost. Investing in your workers makes your workers more productive, means they don't leave you, so you don't have to replace them and have the cost of turnover. You get more talented workers if you've got good benefits. So I think the tide is shifting. We're in a very critical moment where the transformation of how we look at our workplaces can really happen. You guys are entering the labor force right now. So one thing for all of you, and Jessica, you're a senior, so you're getting out there to do it. You guys are talented. Brown graduates are highly sought after. Use your voice. And so many of you already are. Your generation is doing that. You're using your voice to both ask the companies that you want to work for, the companies you're buying goods and services from, what are their values? How are they living them out? And you can ask questions like, what is your caregiving policy? Do you have paid leave? What's your flexible scheduling? How do you do pay and promotion, right? Are you asking me what my last salary was, which is a no-no for to combat gender wage discrimination, or are you just telling me this is what I value the job at, and that's how much you're going to get paid. And you can, your talent and your voice in this moment is really powerful.
I have nothing to add to that. Ditto.
I definitely resonate with the kind of using my voice. I just signed for an offer, and I was like making sure in the contract that I had to go through all like the health insurance and all these things. So I know.
I knew you would, Jessica Dibble.
It's definitely on my mind recently. So to shift a little bit, Time's Up recently wrote a letter to Hollywood Foreign Press Association calling for a restructuring of the organization. And it seems like award shows, not just the Golden Globes, have been consistently and rightfully called out for years. Do you both think that this past season is a final straw and will lead to change, or is there still kind of hesitancy within the Hollywood Entertainment Award show?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think that, look, as I mentioned about, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, all of these industries, all of these award shows, even our unions, they need to renegotiate their own contracts with themselves as far as how they are going out in the world and representing us as artists and representing the work that we are making to the greater world. And I think one of creating things like, the Time's Up Globes hashtag, which we created in order to bring attention to the fact that there are no people of color who are voting members of the Golden Globes, is pretty alarming, and it's worth ringing a bell for. There are some things I think that it's like, okay, well, we'll just quietly chip away at this and we'll just keep working on it internally, however we're going to do that. But when there's such a glaring issue like that, it's important to speak, to be vocal about it. And I've always found that, for the most part, not always, they also want to figure out how to change things. They don't know. All these systems, these organizations, these companies, they don't have the answers. And so having something like Time's Up be able to help them solve it and figure out a way, show them the bridge to get there, is really, really important. So in this particular case, I think that it was important to bring that up, just because you can't have one of the 3 largest award shows in the world have representation like that, when we have some of the most extraordinary filmmakers writing creative work and content being created by Black auteurs, by Black artists right now. That cannot be ignored. And so if you want those people to be represented in the body of the award show and what they ultimately end up nominating, we need to have the same representation behind the scenes as far as who is voting for what. So I think this was a really important thing to bring attention to.
So here's the thing about the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, which Amber knows. It's essentially a private club. So if you look back at the history of it, it was formed, back around World War II of truly people living in Hollywood who were foreign press folks and wanted to gather together. And then they kind of hit on this idea, why don't we start giving away an award? Didn't have a lot of attention to pay to it until it became like a TV show. And now it's really powerful. And interestingly, it was Harvey Weinstein, you remember, Amber, who made it what it is. He realized he could sort of campaign for it. Because there's very strict rules for the Oscars about what you can and cannot do, to lobby to try to win an Oscar. There are no such rules for the Golden Globes. So you can wine and dine and fly people like the Emily in Paris people did, fly them to Paris to visit the set. And there are no rules that require, and that prohibit that. It's 87 people. The total membership of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is 87 people. Not a single Black person, as Amber said. It's been 20 years and they haven't had a single Black person. And they actually have kept out people who meet their criteria, even because it's a private club. And a private club that has no accountability, no transparency, no rules, so no ethics obligations. So they're taking money from all sorts of places. They pay themselves. It's like one of the first not-for-profit organizations I know that pay their members to do the work of the organization. And as a result, they really become the gateway. However, so here's the thing: is the power of that show and being the first show in the award season is the gateway to the Oscars. I mean, that show was held before the Oscar nominations come out. So it has a huge outsized influence that this private country club of folks are deciding for the entire industry. And so when they don't have any, women directors, as they didn't last year, when they overlook, think about this, Bridgerton, not a single nomination, right? Yeah. This year, you go down the list of things that have happened. My particular one that makes me crazy at the moment is Minari was nominated in the foreign language category. Now, apparently the foreign language category exists for films that are in 50% another language other than English, but they didn't apply it to Inglourious Basterds, and they did not apply it to Artist. They've only applied it typically to Asian films made by Asians. They did it last year to The Farewell, and Awkwafina's film, put her in that category too. Both of those films, think about it, are quintessentially American stories, but they put it in the foreign language category, and that perpetuates this idea in our culture of Asians that we're living through in this moment of Asian hate. It's happening because Asian Americans are thought of as other, no matter how long we've lived here. I was born here. I don't even speak Chinese. I'm still an other, right? And you put Minari, a film about a family in Kansas, in the foreign language category, not the best picture category. It perpetuates that. So that's why it's so corrosive to have a group of this insular private country club, making these outsized decisions that affect our culture. And you think about the careers that just got lost, right? The Black filmmakers who never got to succeed, or the Asian directors who never got to succeed because they got overlooked by the Golden Globes, or go down the list. And, I have said, that organization right now is the very definition of institutional racism. That's how that works. Set up your own rules, set up your own little club, start being the gateway to an entire industry and economy, that's institutional racism. And that's why, Time's Up, we've been pushing so hard that they either need to make a fundamental change, or we got to really think about what are we doing, and participating in that kind of an award show.
Yeah, I mean, I think the comparison to a private country club is like perfect. I mean, I didn't even realize like the fact that they just go first influences. I mean, it influences us as a festival even, because like,
Yes.
you see, oh, this film won best film at the Golden Globes. Let's get that director to come speak at our film festival. But then it's like, okay, well, how many films didn't even get the opportunity to be nominated? And like, I also think it's putting what you said, putting those films as foreign films, it just continuously perpetuates like how like Americans, because Golden Globes is primarily for America, like how they view their population and their communities.
And there's a further trickle down effect to that, which is it also influences what gets bought and what gets sold further past that. So they look at these movies as the ones that are nominated and they go, oh, that was nominated for a Golden Globe. Let's buy more movies like that. Let's make more movies like that. Let's develop more movies about white women and white stories that are like that. And that is part of like the deeper, scarier problem, is that it is sort of a snowball effect of white supremacy, in which there is no open space for any other voice to grow or expand or succeed from that.
Right. And I always have thought it's like really weird also, just like, it's like at the end of the day, putting art against art. And it's like, who can really judge that, especially if you're not watching all of the content? Like,
and they don't.
That was
they don't watch all the content. I mean, since we've been doing this work, I've heard stories of, they in particular don't show up at screenings put on by Black directors and Black shows. I mean, they don't show up.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's crazy.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So there's several people, Amber, that have told stories of scheduling films and and at the HFPA's request, scheduling films, and then they don't screenings, and then the members don't show up.
I have no doubt. And it's irresponsible for any award show, for any institution like that has that much power and influence, to not expand. It's just unacceptable on every level.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's infuriating. And you're also only asking that they watch 80% now. So it's not even the full 100, but you think these people who dedicate their careers to this can watch the movies.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so we are coming near to the end of our time. And to wrap it up, Tina, you said this in a recent interview with the Forbes Women's Summit, that out of every crisis, there comes an opportunity. And as most of our audience members are Brown students, and Jess and I are nearing graduation, we want to ask you, Tina, what excites you most about women entering the general workforce? And Amber, what opportunities or changes happening within entertainment will be helpful and welcome women into creative careers?
So, what I said to Forbes, I meant was, with the universality of this pandemic, right? It fell on everyone, even if you were a C-suite person, your kids were home from school too. And you were having to work remotely too. And I think it opened everyone's eyes to the challenges that women in the workforce have felt, for decades, and it really exposed the fissures in our economic structures, in our workplace structures. It exposed, then you layer onto that, the whole George Floyd moment and murder, and Breonna Taylor, and the racial reckoning. And, that opened people's eyes in ways that had never happened before. And so, we are really trying to rebuild a lot of these industries from scratch, really have an opportunity for the first time to look at how we have organized work and change it. And so that comes with a real opportunity. I mean, President Biden said, this is a once in generation opportunity, which is why he put, this multi-trillion-dollar package on the table for a long-term jobs reform. And he's got another package coming to address working families issues. And that's really true. This is a New Deal moment. This can be as transformative as the New Deal. And it's kind of crazy that we haven't had that moment for almost 100 years. And it's kind of time. Right? Yeah. It's time to build an economy that really works for the 21st century. one final just thing for people can go to our website, at timesupnow.org, to take a look at this. But we just issued a new study from our impact lab last week, where we actually took behavioral science and tried to apply that to the workforce. So instead of doing, unconscious bias training or trying to change attitudes, what can we do to change the design of how workplaces are organized to actually reinforce equitable principles? So using the gender gap as the problem we were trying to solve. And we took a look and we found, right, there are designs in the way we do hiring, right, by asking questions like, what was your last salary? In how we do promotions, like having scheduling that is not even, not having caregiving, not having paid leave, and how we actually promote people by like thinking about the last piece of work. If you don't have standards and regular, evaluations, you just remember what the person did the last time. So if she happened to be out on a maternity leave when she was, up for promotion, she doesn't get promoted. And that's all because work has always been organized around what's been known as the ideal worker, meaning the worker who is like devoted to your job, to your company, will be available whenever that you need them. Who does that sound like? Men who have women at home, right? That's been the standard for 200 years, and it's time to change that standard and break it and try to create ideal workplaces. So I'm really excited about this research because I do think it's a paradigm shift and how we think about how to do this work. And, I'm really excited to see more companies kind of try to adopt these, and that'll be phase 2, is trying to get this word out to companies and do more. So that's the kind of change I hope we can see.
Yeah, I echo Tina completely. And I also echo the earlier sentiment that, both of you, Jess and Grace, as cheesy as it sounds, but you really are the future, and your classmates are, your friends are, to take this work that Tina's been doing for decades and we've all been doing, and to just keep propelling it and keep getting involved and staying involved. I think that's the hardest part, is not seeing something like the inception of Time's Up, or even, Me Too, or any of it, is seeing it as a momentary experience for all of us, that it was not just a collective moment, and that this is something that is long term, and that the problems are pervasive and they're deep, and we're in a real detox period right now. I think we're going to be in that way for at least a decade, detoxing our culture, detoxing our system, detoxing our jobs, detoxing our brains, most especially for white people. It is, there's a huge shift happening. And so we all have to play our part, and we all have to stay present and engaged and deeply introspective at looking at how we walk and act and move in the world. And then I would say also reaching out to our friends and helping them do the same, knowing that no journey can be walked alone or should be walked alone, especially when it comes to trying to revolutionize yourself or trying to revolutionize an industry or a school or, a business or whatever that is, that we need allies. We need to all be sort of together and supporting each other and finding out the best ways to do that. So, to anybody who's out there watching and watching this panel, I would say, if there's something that you've been thinking about, find the women, find the people in your community, find the men in your community who are willing to do that work with you, who are willing to step up, who are willing to help change things, and get together and figure out how to do it, because it's going to take all of us, not just a few of us. It's going to take all of us.
This is why Amber's a poet. She's the best.
It's so inspiring. It definitely encourages us, especially our generation, to continue to be persistent and work towards our goals that we want. And with that, I kind of want to bring it to a close. Thank you, Tina and Amber, for joining us this afternoon. It has truly been such a pleasure. And on behalf of the Ivy Film Festival and the larger Brown community, we are so grateful for you both for taking the time out of your busy schedule and weekend to speak with us. We really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a great rest of the academic year.
Yes.
Thank you both so much. I mean, I speak again for Jess and I and everyone. I think we're so inspired by both of you as such successful, strong women who've had like such dynamic careers that have spanned across so many different fields. And so just thank you again for coming. And just a quick note for our audience, remember that festival week runs until Tuesday, so there's still time to catch the rest of our events, including conversations with Janixa Bravo, Isabel Sandoval, and our 2 upcoming panels, representation in film and animating characters of color. Additionally, watch all of our amazing student films, screenplays, and interactive VR arcade that are live now on our website until tomorrow night. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Bye, ladies.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.